Man, I know I got bills to pay, but working for this company has made me so distraught, and I hate having moral quandaries about how I feed myself and how I support my loved ones.
That was a clip from a Disney employee, went viral on Twitter. That's after the company's CEO did not explicitly denounce legislation in Florida that activists have dubbed the Don't Say Gay bill. Now, Bob Chapek is acknowledging the concerns, reportedly noting at the shareholder meeting, quote, many are upset we didn't speak out against the bill. Akiko, Chapek also made a call to Florida's governor to express his disappointment. So a change in about face, I guess I would call it here. Your thoughts on the matter?
Well, this has been an interesting trajectory, Jared, when you think about how it's played out for the last several days, all on social media. And let's back up a bit to talk about what exactly this legislation is. You said don't say gay. That's kind of become how people have described it officially. It's known as the Parental Rights and Education Bill. The House, or the State House, and the Senate have both passed it in Florida. It essentially limits teachers from discussing or acknowledging or addressing the existence of queer people. Now, parents who are in support of it says, look, this allows them to have a little more control on what students can discuss. But those who have been opposed to it are saying that this will have a chilling effect on teachers, limiting what they can and cannot teach. And the outrage among Disney employees really came out after it was revealed that Disney had, in fact, contributed money to those lawmakers who supported the legislation that put Bob Chapek in kind of a tough spot here. And those Disney employees took to Twitter, took to social media, started the hashtag Disney Do Better. And that's why we are here where we are talking about this. Now, Bob Chapek has done an about face here, but that hasn't necessarily quieted these Disney employees. And I'm looking at one in particular. He's an actor and writer, Ben Simon, who has credits in Disney franchises, including DuckTales. He's one of those employees that spoke out initially saying that he is also gay. He was really upset that Disney had supported some of these lawmakers. He's out with a tweet saying, please don't be fooled by this half-hearted triage. The bill was allowed to pass with no public opposition from Disney, and they still intend on funding all the politicians that passed it. Jared, it's important to note that Governor Ron DeSantis hasn't signed the bill yet, but I think the point of contention among employees now is that it's convenient for Disney to come out and say they're opposed to it now, but where was that opposition? It was when it was still being debated among state lawmakers.
I think that's a good point, because that's for kind of when it counted. And it just illustrates a side issue that a lot of corporations face, especially in the modern age, which is who do you lobby? And if you're going to send money, you probably have to send money to both sides if you're a big company like Disney, but then you have to live with the political implications of that. And Disney historically, I grew up in Miami and Florida. Disney was a big part of my childhood. And I remember some controversy around gay pride parades. They were a trailblazer in that field. The Ellen DeGeneres show appearing on ABC, an openly gay woman, ABC owned by Disney. So they were kind of trailblazers in the field. I would have expected Chapek to come out on the issue a little bit earlier, but really difficult to navigate these things, as we saw with the NFL. The player crisis that we had in the NFL a few years ago. So I think putting it all together, Akiko, I'm not sure at the end of the day if the Disney employees are going to feel better about this, but I think Chapek finally spoke his mind in the minds of most of his employees.
Yeah, it's just yet another example about the power of social media for employees to be able to speak out. And we've heard more and more that these values, quote unquote, are really important for employee retention, too. I just want to point to one last tweet here from Abigail Disney, who, of course, has often spoken out against the company that is within her name here, saying, I'm deeply angered by Disney thinking it can look the other way for its hateful Don't Say Gay bill, and it takes a serious flawed moral compass to not see that funding the people who wrote and passed this is anything less than supporting their ugly agenda. So we'll see how this all continues to play out.
Fallout between former CEO Bob Iger and his successor, current Disney CEO Bob Chapek. A lot of drama going on in this space. So for more on this Disney dilemma, we have Yahoo Finance's Alexandra Canal. This sounds like almost an episode of The Bachelor or something. I mean, it's a lot of drama going on there over at Disney. Give us the breakdown of exactly what's at stake here. What's going on between the two Bobs?
Yeah, it's really Bob versus Bob here, Brian. And I mean, Disney, it seems to be going through a bit of a PR problem. There's obviously that report from CNBC, and this comes amid walkouts, employee walkouts that are scheduled for tomorrow over the company's reaction to Florida's controversial Don't Say Gay bill. This bill would ban classroom instruction and conversation about sexual orientation and gender identity in public schools between kindergarten and third grade. And the issue here is that Bob Chapek, current Disney CEO, he pretty much skirted around it and then only publicly denounced it after intense pressure from employees and after it passed through the state Senate. Now, Chapek is a very different leader than Bob Iger. Iger was not afraid to give his opinion on certain political issues. Chapek, on the other hand, he really wanted to distance both himself and the company from that, to not cause any further friction between executives and employees. Clearly, that decision backfired. Now, keep in mind that Chapek's contract is up early next year, so this is crunch time when it comes to him making decisions that really solidify him as a leader and cement his role within the company longer term. Obviously, controversies like this do not help this case. You were mentioning that CNBC in-depth report about how there is current friction between Iger and Chapek. According to the outlet, several Disney employees have called Iger to, quote, express their disappointment in Chapek amid the Don't Say Gay bill backlash. There's been other issues when it comes to overall business strategy, how differently these two men operate. Apparently, there was, quote unquote, some awkward in-person interaction. So clearly the tension is there. It's palpable. And all of that being said, you know, the stock, it's down a little less than 2% right now. So I think investors are still trying to figure out what this means longer term, how this could affect the company in the future. Yahoo Finance did reach out to Disney for comment, but they have not heard back.
Yeah, did not respond. And also worth noting, the New York Times did a lot of legwork in the reporting there as well, which CNBC expanded on. I mean, Ali, I want to ask you just kind of about another news headline that we were seeing about Disney, and that regards their theme parks. Obviously, the COVID outbreak in China, particularly in view because of their zero COVID policy. So it sounds like the Shanghai resort there is going to be closed, I believe, this week. How impactful is that going to be for Disney?
Yeah, I mean, the Shanghai Disney Resort closing today, Monday, until further notice. The resort cited China's rising infections. Now, cases have risen from just 70 earlier this month to over 1,600 as of Saturday. There has been increased lockdowns throughout the region. As you were mentioned, China does have that zero tolerance policy. So lockdowns, shutdowns, further restrictions, that's all commonplace within the area. Now, Disney did say that its theme park division generated record income in fiscal Q1. So that was sort of a good sign at the time that perhaps the worst could be over. But Shanghai Disneyland was the first theme park to close in early 2020. And then we sort of saw the rest follow suit. So, you know, that's certainly something to keep an eye on, because the theme park division for Disney is so crucial, so important. In the US, COVID cases, they seem to be under control for now, but there have been new subvariants that are raising some concern that the country could go through another wave. Typically what we see overseas tends to repeat itself in the country here over the next few weeks. So hopefully that doesn't happen, but especially with increased travel, people wanting to get out there. There's been several reports that people just want to live their lives. You never know what could happen with this pandemic. So I'm sure Disney is watching that very closely, because again, the theme park division is something that really drives revenue for the company overall.
Trending on Twitter today, hashtag Disney walkout. It is, of course, a reaction to how Disney and specifically their CEO, Bob Chapek, handled the Don't Say Gay bill, the legislation passed in Florida. Chapek originally said nothing, then came out and opposed the legislation, did not apparently satisfy Disney employees. Ali Kanal here with a special guest on that story. Hey, Ali.
Hey, Dave. Thanks so much. I'm joined now by Nicholas Luis Maldonado. He's a current Disney employee who participated in today's walkout. Nicholas, thanks so much for joining us today. Let's first start out with the walkout that happened today. Describe your participation and the reaction you received from fellow colleagues and upper management.
So thank you so much for having me on today. So it's been an incredible busy day. So it has been just myself walking 2 hours from where I live down to the Hotel Plaza Boulevard outside the Walt Disney World. entrance. And so right now, what I'm seeing right now and why I decided to walk out was, so firstly, my journey began with Disney back in 2018 at Disneyland Resort in Southern California. Then I moved down here with my fiance, June of 2021. And then till right now, I'm just not feeling the Disney magic as everyone is feeling right now. So many cast members are upset, and this hashtag Disney Do Better has been trending so much on Twitter. And I'm really just like overwhelmed by the responses, but incredibly just excited that the message that the Disney Do Better is getting out there. And the responses I've been getting from my colleagues that are just allies and supporters that are not walked out with me today, but I mean, that are just, they're saying just step up. They're glad I'm stepping up and just holding the CEO accountable for not like speaking up quickly against this bill. And so we expect more from the CEO. He's done a town hall already speaking about the Don't Say Gay bill. And we're hoping that he speaks more about it. And I've actually challenged him today to speak up and speak publicly against any future anti-LGBT legislation. Don't just say it on social media, but publicly do it in this kind of setting as I'm doing right now with all of you, in which I'm so incredibly proud and honored to be on today. Because I mean, I just want to be once again proud to say I'm a Disney World employee, but at this time right now, I'm still not feeling the Disney magic. It's a step in the right direction by their statement, but so much more is needed to be done beyond today of the 15-minute walkouts and now with the full-scale walkout.
And Nicholas, there was a statement today from Disney Parks Experiences and Products saying, quote, "We will not stand for discrimination in any form. We oppose any legislation that infringes on basic human rights." What's your reaction to that statement? I know you said that you hope there's more communication, more town halls. Mm-hmm. What more do you want to see from Disney moving forward?
I just want to see like these statements like that. I just want to see more statements like they presented today. I'm incredibly happy to have seen that on Twitter before I walked my journey out to the entrance of Walt Disney World. And just the reactions we've been getting today, the support, which is outstanding. Yes, I've gotten a little bit of negativity from some other folks, but that's not stopping me. That's not stopping other cast members that have walked out. Today was my day off, and I just walked out on my own free will. But still, I'm at risk, though, no matter what. But it is beyond worth it. And just the support that we're all getting to the organizers that put this together, I give them all the props and just thanks, and to all the support, and also to all the members of the press for hearing us, listening to us. And I just hope that we see more statements like we've seen today from Walt Disney World. I want them to truly mean that. Truly mean it.
And Nicholas, it's beyond just Disney too, right? There's been a workers' revolution, it seems. Yeah. And there's their Netflix walkouts over the Dave Chappelle controversy. Oh my Starbucks workers wanting to unionize. I mean, Kellogg's, Amazon. Why do you think workers are feeling empowered to speak out right now?
There's a long list. This is a revolution happening amongst workers. There's a revolution happening of Netflix workers stepping out because they saw that Chappelle, the comedian Chappelle, was like what he said like about transgender people, and Netflix not taking a stance right away. I'm taking it. They took power to that. They walked out. They took it upon themselves and walked out. And so now this is what we're doing at Walt Disney World. We're walking out. We're taking those 15-minute breaks and then expressing our viewpoints. And as I expressed today and said many times today, that and right now, and what others will say that, they want better and fair work conditions. Starbucks want better wages. They want to be unionized. They want a livable wage of at least $15 an hour. I'm not going to go off topic, but there's so many workers, so many companies, and so many workers like walking out because they want better conditions. And the Kellogg's workers and everyone, I just believe they are stepping up because they're sick and tired of the bureaucracy around this, and that we put our lines to bring and make all the cereals and all the Kellogg's products that they put out. So now it's up to the company to provide us with the better conditions, work conditions, and benefits. Same thing with Netflix, better, fairer, and workplace of treating every employee with respect and letting go of a comedian like Chappelle, and what he said has no place in Netflix. And so, the same thing now with Disney. If Disney truly says that they believe in inclusion, and I will say this, we're not a marketing tool. We are not a pawn for your marketing to recruit more cast members. If you truly mean what you say in a statement, then I'm not speaking. Every other cast member has their own personal story, but as someone who's openly bisexual and someone who has a fiance who is disabled. I mean, there's many cast members that are disabled and LGBT, and also Black trans women that right now they're so much facing hatred across the country in their own communities and who they are. And also, I will say this to the other side that says this bill is a pro-family bill that protects children. Well, I call BS on that, and the reason why is because
Nicholas, I'm so sorry. We're gonna have to cut the interview short just because we're running out of time. But really appreciate you joining us, and we'll have to have you back on to discuss all of this. Thank you.
Florida politics. Ron DeSantis, the governor of that state, has just signed into law what opponents have dubbed the Don't Say Gay bill, which restricts gender education, sexual education among school children there. Disney at first was sort of mum on the law and now has changed its tune. Our Allie Canal is here with that story. So Disney sort of gradually, kind of not reversing entirely, but gradually going from one extreme of saying not much to really saying something here, Allie.
Yeah, Julie, we're in a very different spot than we were earlier this month. Disney having quite the fiery response after Ron DeSantis officially signed this bill into law. They wrote in part, quote, "The Don't Say Gay bill should never have passed and should never have been signed into law. Our goal as a company is for this law to be repealed by the legislature or struck down in the courts, and we remain committed to supporting the national and state organizations working to achieve that." Now, this is a very strong stance, as we were saying, and follows a string of employee stage walkouts in protest of CEO Bob Chapek's handling of the law, which will officially go into effect on July 1. As you were saying, Julie, Bob Chapek initially opted not to speak on the matter, at least publicly, choosing instead to work behind the scenes in an attempt to soften the legislation. But ultimately, that did not work. It blew up in his face. And after very heavy backlash, he finally decided to speak on things, denouncing the bill during the company's annual shareholder meeting and apologizing to employees in a company memo. Yahoo Finance did have the chance to speak with one employee who participated in last week's walkout. Here's what he had to say.
We expect more from the CEO. He's done a town hall already speaking about the Don't Say Gay bill. And we're hoping that he speaks more about it. And I've actually challenged him today to speak up and speak publicly against any future anti-LGBT legislation. Don't just say it on social media, but publicly do it.
So yesterday's strong public stance, a step in the right direction. Disney has also unveiled a new task force that will, quote, develop action plans to make more LGBT-aware content for children and family. Chapek and other senior leaders also are set to conduct a global listening tour to meet with employees. So as we were saying, really a complete 180 from where we were a month ago.
Allie, of course, there are other workers right now fighting big corporations. How does that help or hurt what's happening at Disney?
Yeah, there's really a big call to action right now when it comes to corporations having a responsibility that extends beyond their core businesses. We've seen Starbucks workers fighting to unionize. We just got news today that Condé Nast workers also want to unionize. It wasn't that long ago that we saw Netflix employees stage their own public walkouts in response to Dave Chappelle's controversial comedy special. There's been instances at Amazon, Kellogg's. This is really happening all over, and it's creating a ripple effect, I think, throughout all of these companies. I spoke with the president of one of the unions out in California that represents several worker classifications within Disney. He said that members expect Disney to be a good corporate citizen, that workers are now realizing that they have more power than they think, and it's long overdue that they hold these employers accountable. So really, to put it bluntly, we are in the midst of a workers' revolution, and we're seeing the ramifications of that play out in real time.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis not to mess with Mickey Mouse as a response to Disney CEO Bob Chapek's criticism of Florida's so-called Don't Say Gay legislation. DeSantis is taking aim squarely at Disney. The state Senate voting earlier today to terminate Disney World's special status, and the Republican-led House is expected to pass it as well. Rick Newman here to explain what this means for the happiest place on earth. Rick, good to see you. I'm old enough to remember when conservatives wanted to stay out of business, but that is no longer the case. But what does this mean for the business model at Disney?
We're not really sure because this has been in place since Disney World got started in Florida in the Orlando area all the way back in 1967. But probably it means Disney will have to pay more in taxes. And interestingly, it could also mean that people who live in that area who may not have anything to do with Disney may have to pay more in local taxes as well, basically because Disney kind of runs the government there. It's like a quasi-governmental setup. So if Florida does change this law, sorry, that's my cell phone, then the people who live there might have to pay more because Disney won't be covering government services in the way it does right now. So this is just one of many ways we have seen consumer-facing companies face fire from both sides in the last few years over political issues. And let's remember that one of the reasons Disney has opposed, and this is all about the so-called Don't Say Gay law regarding education in Florida schools, Disney was getting flack from its customers and from the public for not opposing the law. So they're getting pressure from customers to oppose the law now, and now the government in Florida is basically saying, nope, we're going to raise your taxes because you're opposing this law. So can't win situation for Disney.
From customers and also from their own employees as well. And so with all of that, both internal and external backlash, what does this square up for Disney going forward from here? We're taking a look at shares. Of course, much of the share price action that we've seen on the day closely tied to the streaming side of the business as we had been watching Netflix earnings yesterday. But I think going forward from here, what would you particularly look for to come from Disney? Their own management is going through their own little brouhaha at this point in time as well.
I mean, probably very little in terms of how this one action. I mean, clearly this is politically motivated. This has stopped being surprising. So this is really just a cost of doing business for some of these companies. So I don't expect this will affect Disney's financials very much. But something that caught my eye is that the Democratic governor of Colorado, Jared Polis, said, hey, we would love to host Disney. He's offering Disney asylum in Colorado and saying, hey, why don't you start a mountain Disney or a mountain escape, and we'd be happy to have you. So Colorado's would you fair to call it a purple state, and Jared Polis is a Democrat. He's also gay. And there's one Democrat saying, we'd love to have you under any conditions. We want the business. So maybe there are a few states in the middle that still would just like to have companies come and run their business without getting in the way.
And Rick, you raise an interesting point because obviously Florida is pushing into things like wanting to become a crypto hub, a global crypto hub. What sort of message does this send, though, when we do keep seeing this sort of intersection between politics and how that could affect your business if you want to do business in Florida, but you know that you have to tread this fine line?
Well, clearly the message from Governor DeSantis is we want businesses to come to Florida as long as you're not a woke business. So I guess it's worth keeping in mind that there are a lot of companies that don't have to take sides on these issues. It's really the consumer-facing companies the companies that would face some kind of boycott from customers and also from employees, as Brad pointed out, those are the ones that have to, steer around these types of landmines. There are a lot of industrial companies, wholesale level companies, and companies like that, I guess, can take advantage of what still is a pretty favorable business environment in Florida to go there. But this is just a new thing CEOs have to deal with. I don't think this is a passing fad. I think CEOs at this point, as part of the risk of doing business in any environment, they have to ask themselves, am I going to get stuck in the middle of some political controversy I don't want anything to do with that's going to force me to take sides? And then if you do have to take sides, what should you do? There are some advocates who say, look, just take a principled stance and deal with the consequences. But of course, we see a lot of companies kind of trying to have it both ways, which is basically what Disney did here by staying silent for a long time and not taking a position, and then taking a late position that has now generated this action from the governor.
Rick, another company dealing with Ron DeSantis is Twitter. He also took aim at them, saying he wants to hold their board accountable for their fiduciary duty. His suggestion is that they should accept Elon's takeover bid. And at the base of all this is a guy who wants to run for president. Most see him as the signature opponent of Donald Trump. Is this a popular play? Is this how he builds the campaign, or is there any actual teeth to holding the board accountable here?
My first question for Governor DeSantis is, whatever happened to limited government?
Yeah.
Dave, I think you raised that question at the beginning of this segment. I mean, what is the deal with Republican governors who supposedly believe in just letting businesses run themselves and stay out of the way? How often do we hear Republicans say the best thing for government to do is just stay out of the way? Well, clearly, this is one Republican who's not staying out of the way. So as with many Trumpy elements of the Republican Party, this is a test of, does the old Republican, pro-business Republican Party even still exist? Or is it more effective politically these days for Trumpy Republicans, which is to say, I think the majority of the Republican Party, to just go for winning anti-woke points or every type of point? And this gets into the culture wars and the cultural battles and all those things. Should they just regard business as yet another combatant in these various types of wars? I don't know the answer, but it's quite interesting to watch. I'll say that.
The Florida legislature passed a bill that would eliminate a district where Disney effectively operates its own government. The measures would dissolve the Reedy Creek Special District. That's where Disney runs their own municipal services as a fact. And this move would likely increase taxes on residents in those areas as a result. And Akiko, this is just a crazy story that kind of stems from Governor DeSantis's beef with Disney over the Don't Say Gay bill, which you'll recall was a big corporate issue for the company in terms of standing up against that legislation. But it's interesting to see this ripple over into people's lives and people living in this Reedy Creek community.
Yeah, and that context you just pointed out, I think is important to establish here. That Don't Say Gay bill essentially said that teachers in public schools could not discuss gender identity or sexual orientation. Now, Disney initially was seen as contributing to lawmakers who supported that bill, faced a lot of backlash from employees, and then kind of had to backtrack and say, we don't support this bill, we're not for it. Employees still staged a walkout. So Disney has been having to deal with this issue internally. Now, on top of that, you've got Governor Ron DeSantis signing this bill. And it's an interesting one, Brian, because I'm looking back on the history of all of this. 1967 is when this district was first established as this agreement between Disney and the state. Essentially means they can govern as their own. But now that they won't, those costs for potholes, for roads, for power, that reportedly would be transferred back to the taxpayers. And you have to wonder if the governor saw this coming and whether, in fact, he could face backlash as a result.
Yeah, and, I think what is so interesting about this story is that people might be surprised to find that this was an arrangement that existed in the first place for, as you point out, over 50 years, right? Disney is a big reason why large swaths of the Orlando area exist at all. I mean, the City of Celebration is another example that the whole thing was put together by Disney, and there have been instances where it's Disney that's effectively the government there, not any county. And this is literally a carve-out from the county of Orange, for example, in that area. And it raises the question, well, why would you want to try to penalize now a company that has been so influential to the economic development? But then on the other side of things, I think it is a valid question to be saying, how much benefits have these companies gotten in the decades, in the 60s or in the 70s, especially in the likes of Disney, in literally private land development? I mean, I think it is a valid question, even though this kind of stems from a whole different debate. Obviously, a lot of politics looped into this, but a story that's definitely developing, and we will continue to follow here on Yahoo Finance.
Right, so we asked a good question there. What does it mean to libertarian? What does it mean to be Republican? And that's because of really this breaking news here. On the battle between Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and Disney, the latest is the governor signing the bill into law that actually strips Disney of its self-governing tax status, and all sides are weighing in here. The White House today weighed in, saying DeSantis' punitive actions are just wrong, while former Republican Governor Charlie Crist, turned Democrat, says DeSantis actually wants to be the king of Florida, not an elected official. And Brad, this is a very strange dynamic in which we're in. And I just mentioned what Rick said there about what does it mean to be libertarian? What does it mean to be Republican today? Because this is unlike anything we've ever seen. A governor punishing a private company for its political stance, and that sets a very dangerous precedent in this country.
Well, it's an overflow from what we've seen Trump do before, and if there's anybody that
you're right,
he is trying to lean
That's
into,
true.
It's Trump's base. Trump, even the moment he was talking about running for a campaign and then eventually ended up becoming the president of the United States. After that, he directly started to take shots at companies who did not align with him. And so if there's anything that Governor Ron DeSantis is doing, it's going after companies that go against the GOP, the Republican Party, and whatever the Republican Party stands for at this point in time. And it seems to be leaning more so into anything that is anti what progressives want to see an agenda move forward around. And it's not just progressives. We should all be thinking collectively about what a progressed America looks like, not a conservative or a progressive, but what actual progress looks like in the future. Yeah. If there's one thing I also take away from this, it's look at the counties that he's going after, because this would affect Orange County and Osceola County. Those are two, in the most recent election, blue counties that want the way of President Joe Biden.
You're not suspecting he did the math on that, are you?
I am fully alleging that he did the math on this. And so with that in mind, in going after those two counties specifically, if you saw any type of population migration because of the taxation that would then be levied on those counties as a result of Disney not having to pay the same amount of taxes and the burden being so much more on the property taxes for individuals, then that directly impacts the voting power in those two counties, because we know that counties that are near metropolitan areas typically lean blue. So in this that has become more of a purple state-ish over the years, or gotten closer to it, that's exactly where he's going after in this.
But while this animates the small, far-right base, as a guy who wants to run for president, I just can't imagine this is a large unifying issue to take on a company that up until 3 months ago was universally loved. And again, a very dangerous precedent for a governor to be taking punitive actions over political stances. A lot to talk about with that one.
All of that, just the very latest, that has increased internal pressure on CEO Bob Chapek 2 years into the job. To talk more about that, let's bring in Yahoo Finance's Ali Canal, who's been following all the ins and outs of this story. What's the next step?
You know, it's interesting to talk about this because I don't even think a lot of people even knew that Disney had this special tax district. I know in my friend group, everyone's saying, wait, this was a thing. But when we talk about Bob Chapek, we're certainly at an inflection point when it comes to his leadership legacy, his response to the Parental Rights and Education Act, the so-called Don't Say Gay bill, this drama with DeSantis. It's tainting that legacy. And when we look at Disney, the company only had two CEOs prior to Chapek. We had Michael Eisner and Bob Iger. And Iger was really looked at as the face of this company. He had a very specific leadership style. He really went in on diversity and inclusion, overseeing the productions of films like Black Panther, Moana. And in fact, when it came to the so-called Don't Say Gay bill, Iger doubled down against it when Chapek was largely silent, saying that it's potentially harmful to children. So I think because Iger's legacy is still so fresh in the minds of both investors and employees, the expectation for Chapek to really deliver on this test was incredibly high. And he essentially failed on all cylinders. By him not taking a side, he basically offended everyone in the process. And I think this is something that we're seeing with a lot of corporations today, especially with this battle with politicians on both sides of the equation. They need to take a stand politically. They need to weigh in on societal issues, or you'll deal with what we're seeing at Disney today. So, I think the stock is largely trading relatively flat right now. I think investors are still trying to digest the long-term consequences and implications of this and what it can mean for the future of Disney and the company. But when it comes to Chapek specifically, he's largely been seen as a numbers guy, and he seems to have totally missed the boat when it comes to Disney's culture, which is largely driven by its employees.
Well, and on the issue of politics entering the fray, you have to wonder if there's more in the pipeline. There's, a dozen states roughly that are considering similar bills to what Florida's passed, and you wonder if that's going to conflict with other companies too. Let's bring in another voice into the conversation. We've got Lee Cockrell. He is the former executive vice president over at Disney. Lee, it's good to talk to you today. Before we get into the specifics about Disney, I know you teach a course on executive leadership and management now. So I'm curious how you would rate the leadership of Bob Chapek so far into his tenure.
Well, I think it's different times we're in right now, and he's kind of in a dilemma. This Don't Say Gay bill, if he doesn't stand up and support the values of Disney, which are basically we treat everybody the same that comes to Disney, no matter where they're from or their religion or sexual orientation. And we also have a very inclusive workforce that expects us to stand up and support everyone. And we always have across the world. And I think that's why most people came there. So dilemmas are always hard. What do? Do you stand up for your values or your company and hopefully yourself, or get into these political battles, which are more and more causing issues that probably didn't even exist? So that's kind of my point of view on this. He was in trouble either way he went.
And Lee, from a PR standpoint, how does Disney bounce back from something like this? I saw the other day on the cover of the New York Post, it was DeSantis drop kicks Disney. So no matter where you stand on this equation, it just doesn't look good. So what should Disney do next to really preserve their reputation?
Well, I think Disney needs to keep doing what they've always done. There was no issue until DeSantis brought this up. There was absolutely no issue. I don't even know if the teachers understand it, or even I had 3 grandkids go through school in Florida, and I don't ever remember any issues about talking about sexual issues in kindergarten to grade 3. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious to me why this was created. If you attack Disney, you're going to get great name recognition, and there's a group of people out there that have issues with these different sexual orientation and how deal with them. So I think we just keep doing it, and we keep taking care of everybody. And I've been through these before, by the way. We've had boycotts before for years over different issues, including gay and lesbian issues. And it always shakes out. I think Disney will be around for a long, long time, and this will fade out like everything else does.
So Lee, let's back up a bit, because we're talking about what has played out in Florida. There is a special district that Disney has been a part of that essentially allows them to operate as their own government, their own city. With this law passing, that gets revoked. From an operational standpoint, what does that mean for Disney?
Well, it's going to be difficult because Disney, I think if you've been there, it's probably the best run city in the world. It's 40 square miles. We have a huge number, 52 million visitors a year, 75,000 cast members working there. It's a city, including contractors, and we can get things done very quickly. We follow all codes. I would tell you Disney is the safest zip code in America, the cleanest zip code in America, and maybe even the happiest zip code in America. So it has worked just fine. And I am almost positive the local jurisdictions in Orange County and Osceola County don't want anything to do with having to get involved in this. They're having enough trouble just dealing with the growth that's already happening in Orlando, getting highways and housing and all of those kinds of things done. Disney's even building low-income housing on the property now to take care of the issues which local government doesn't seem to be able to do. So, it depends how you think about it. Disney would not be as the place it is today without this district being able to expedite and get things done quickly.
So from an experiential standpoint, what do you think changes for visitors?
What do I think changes now because of
changes for visitors?
Oh, I don't think there's going to be any change for a visitor. I think this is just like all these other issues that come up. This will be gone in a few weeks or a few months. Disney may lose the district. Disney will continue to figure it out like we always do. And, new construction may take longer. Getting the highway fixed may take longer. But I think once the guests are here, they're going to have the same experience they've always had. And the average guest comes back every year for their whole life. And every day, 70% of the people at Walt Disney World have been there before. And so, it's hard. It's difficult today for big companies, but it'll continue to be it'll be here a long, long time, doing quite well and making a lot of money and taking care of a lot of guests.
And Lee, what's your take on big consumer-facing corporations like Disney getting involved in politics? Do you think we've entered a new era where these corporations need to take a side one way or another when it comes to these societal issues?
Well, politics is just part of life. You either stand up for what you believe in or you don't stand up for what you believe in. And I think we like to call it politics, but it's really how life is determined and how people are treated and respected and included and involved and listened to, and their opinion counts. And that's what most of America is saying. We want people to be more included. And I hope we continue to stand for that. And, I don't think you can give up your values over these kinds of things, although some companies are going to try. And going down the middle today doesn't work very well. I agree with you there. You need to pretty much lead out loud, let people know where you stand, who you are, and then the guests will determine whether they want to do business with you or not.
Lee, it has been a rocky few months for Bob Chapek, no question about that. To Ali's point, it was first about him saying, we're not going to get involved in the politics, then being revealed that Disney had actually donated to some of these lawmakers who supported the bill. And then he had to reverse course, but still had employees walk out. If you could advise him, how does he correct course, knowing the culture of the company?
You have to anticipate the kinds of things that are going to happen in life and be ready for them. And this is not an issue you couldn't anticipate, like any crisis, and be ready for it. I would say generally Bob probably thinks now, and I do too, that he should have come out right away. You've got to stand up quick. You can't wait a week to decide how you're going to respond to an issue like gay issues today or political issues. Or you got to respond. You got to be there, and you will have somebody mad at you no matter which way you respond. That's just the way life is today, and you can't avoid it. And you cannot ride the fence. Those days are over, and everything. Political is like, we say political, don't get involved in politics, but politics is what drives our lives in every part of it, and how people are treated, and what good quality of life they have. And so it's one of those dilemmas that can't be solved. You're going to get in trouble one way or the other. I found that out my whole career. Making the guests happy, the employees happy, and making money is really quite difficult.
Well, and that was before you could express your outrage on social media, right? Lee,
I think attendance is going to tell the story. We'll see. I would be buying stock right now if I was Disney, because the money's going to keep rolling in.
Well, Lee, appreciate your insight today.
That's how Americans are. We have short memories.
Lee Cockrell, former Disney World Resort Executive VP, and our thanks to Ali Canal.
All right, they say everything is bigger in Texas, so why not add Disney to the Lone Star State? A Texas judge actually inviting the world's happiest place to relocate. amidst their in-state squabble with Governor Ron DeSantis. How did the House of Mouse arrive in this space at all, though? Let's talk about it with Richard Fogelsong, author of Married to the Mouse, Walt Disney World in Orlando. Also with us, Ali Canal here for the interview. Richard, good to see you. Before we get into this particular mess, as it is indeed, the title of your book implies this is a bit of a marriage, a relationship. How is it like a relationship or a marriage between Disney and South Florida?
Well, this is an economic development marriage. I think a lot of deals between a big state and a corporation are in the nature of a marriage. Sometimes you say can't live with them, can't live without them. Other times people say, well, this state became what it did because of the economic marriage that occurred.
And rarely do marriages just go south overnight. There's usually issues along the way. What were the issues that kind of led us into this moment?
Well, I think there's actually been a pretty happy marriage here. The conflict mostly has occurred at the county level. That is the government that is the closest to Disney. Normally, the Disney Company has been able to have its way with the state legislature. They have made a lot of campaign contributions. In this case, campaign contributions to Republican legislators. Now they find themselves in trouble with those same legislators.
And Richard, in your view, without this special tax district, do you think Disney will be able to operate and, more importantly, grow at the same level that catapulted them to where they are today?
Well, when the Disney Company came to Florida, they knew they would never have the influence that they had then. So they wanted a prenuptial agreement, in essence, so that they could continue to have influence in state government. And for a very long time, about 55 years, they were successful at that. However, they ran afoul of Governor DeSantis, and it really wasn't about the powers of the Reedy Creek Improvement District. It was about free speech, and they disagreed on a matter of wokeness with respect to LGBTQ rights.
What's at stake here in this special status for both sides, not just for Disney, but for the state as well?
Well, I call it a Vatican with mouse ears because it's essentially the same kind of authority that the Vatican has in Rome and in the state of Italy. And as I said a moment ago, Disney wanted these powers. They did not like having to deal with the city of Anaheim at Disneyland. So they wanted to be able to regulate themselves, especially with regard to things like building and zoning law. And they wanted to be able to provide public services unto themselves so they could tailor those services to their precise needs.
And Richard, you've said in previous interviews that you believe this bill was rushed and lawmakers didn't really think of the long-term consequences in terms of taxes for the citizens of Orlando, in terms of operation for Disney. Once the dust settles here, how likely do you think it is that Reedy Creek is actually dissolved?
I don't think it's very likely because, frankly, the consequences are too dire here. Already you're seeing conversations about what's the real cost of this and who will pay that cost. And from all appearances now, if you listen to our county officials, it's likely to be paid. The cost is apt to be paid by the people who live here. And I don't think that's going to be a very popular idea.
So on one side, you've got 80,000 Disney employees in Florida. On the other side, you've got hundreds of millions in tax exemptions. In particular, though, you just said you don't think it comes to fruition, but how will it break down? Why won't it happen?
Right. Well, the laws that were passed said, yeah, it will be dissolved, but not for another 13 months. And I think that wiser minds will prevail once they begin to look at the consequences. This bill was passed in 72 hours. The bill analysis that was done in the state legislature was about a paragraph long for each of the three bills that were considered. So we really don't know what the financial impact will be. The governor says one thing, and maybe he's clairvoyant. I don't know. He hasn't presented any numbers yet. And the county officials, they say something very different, that $200 billion might be charged to somebody, and we don't know who they are.
And Richard, I'm curious to get your take on this as a Disney historian. What do you make of Bob Chapek and how his leadership style fits into the culture of Disney at the moment?
Well, that's the $64,000 question, indeed. Well, that's billions, actually, yeah. More than that. How those bonds are going to be paid. Disney has said that they're not going to pay for them if they don't no longer have these powers of the Reedy Creek Improvement District. They don't have the capacity to tax themselves. to be able to pay to retire the bond. Somebody else is going to have to do that.
And meanwhile, Bob Iger just kind of hovering out there, looming over his shoulder, if you will. Quickly, would Disney ever leave? I mentioned in the intro about Texas inviting them, and where, of course, the politics are just about exactly the same. Would they ever leave? And in the end, how do you think this resolves itself?
Well, I think they need therapy, not divorce. And I don't see how this can work out because someone has to pay for those. I can imagine that the Disney company will send a shot across the bow of the state legislature threatening not to pay up so that someone else has to pay. And I can imagine them, too, talking about investing elsewhere. Now, you can't pick up a theme park and move it somewhere else, but you can make investments somewhere else. And maybe the Disney company will pursue that strategy Michael Eisner did of building some smaller parks elsewhere. He never really carried through, but he threatened to do that.
Sure will be interesting to watch. Richard Fogelsong, the book is Married to the Mouse, Walt Disney World and Orlando. Great to have you here, and also Ali Canal as well. Thank you both.
Well, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has revoked Disney's special district status after Disney spoke out against the Don't Say Gay bill, pulling into question just how accountable businesses should be to politicians. We've got Yahoo Finance's Rick Newman on the case. Rick, I know you've got a lot to say about this. Take it away.
Well, the interesting thing about it is this is a law that the legislature passed and the governor signed in Florida, but it does not go into effect until June of 2023. So there's more than a year for something to change and for the legislature to say, well, we're going to repeal this law. But it pretty much seems like they basically want Disney to change the public stance they've taken and say, OK, we are opposed to the law, but now we're going to change our mind and we're going to support the law so that we can get our special tax privileges back. I mean, this is really a no-brainer for a company like Disney. They just need to make it very clear. They took a public stance. They're not changing anything. And if it means they lose their special status, then they're just going to have to deal with that. I think there's some chance the Republicans could backtrack on this because if Disney does lose this sort of special municipal status it has, it is going to cause a problem for the counties there that are going to have to take on a big administrative burden and costs they don't have right now because Disney handles it. So that could sort of backfire on Republicans. But I mean, look, any CEO of a public company these days has to be prepared for these political battles because you've got consumers now, on one hand, will boycott companies if their policies seem objectionable or if they don't support the right law. But then you've got politicians at this point, mostly in Republican states, who are trying to rope companies into these political battles. So businesses just need to take a stand. They need to take what they think is the best stand for their customers, their employees, everybody else that they're answerable to, and tell the politicians, leave us alone. We're not participating in your culture wars or your social wars or whatever wars you're fighting.
Rick, I have to wonder if this is a sign of things to come with other states now considering a similar bill to what Florida has passed.
Well, it's a sign of what has already happened and what is probably going to intensify in the future. I mean, it's not a new thing anymore that companies are getting dragged into political battles. I mean, just to remember a couple, we had Delta Airlines banned special discounts for the NRA, and then the NRA wanted to boycott. There's going to be more of this, I think, because we are so politicized, and we're getting more politicized, not less politicized. And the big thing that's coming down the road that companies need to prepare for it is what the Supreme Court might do on Roe v. Wade, the abortion protections. I mean, this is not something companies are used to thinking about. Yeah. This is not the business of most companies. Mm-hmm. But we are going to get into a situation where states are already beginning to essentially ban abortion or come very close to it. It's already become a big political battle, and companies are going to get drawn into it in the states where it's happening, because customers are going to say you need to oppose this law, and the companies are just going to have to figure out how to take a stance that, I mean, there's going to be a cost somewhere. They have to do what's right for the people who they are accountable to, not the politicians.
But they may have forgotten a key provision that says they can't do that without paying off the company's $1 billion bond debt. Let's bring in Yahoo Finance's Rick Newman, who has been following all the twists and turns of this story. Rick, explain. What's going on here?
Well, Disney finally filed a statement based on this action that happened last week. And they said, well, if Florida goes through with this, and let's keep in mind, this is not supposed to go into effect until June of 2023, so more than a year from now. But they said, here would be the practical effects if Florida really wants to go through with this. There's about $1 billion in what's effectively municipal debt that Disney has issued just to fund operations in that area. And that would have to be transferred to two counties who then would have to overtake a lot of these municipal operations that Disney has been doing. So these two counties have said, we don't have the budget for that. And there's one estimate that says this would raise taxes about $250 per year per taxpayer for people in those two districts to fund the municipal activities that Disney is now doing. So when you get deeper into the analysis, it looks as if maybe this was actually working out better for local residents than it was for Disney, because Disney, in effect, was footing some of the bills for municipal services there in exchange for the autonomy to kind of govern itself. So these Florida lawmakers clearly did not think this through. Generally, it's a stupid move to try to punish any single company because it does or does not take the stance you want it to take on one political issue, which is exactly what happened here. So this is far from over. I suppose this means Disney could sue, or Disney could say, fine, we're not gonna do anything. We're just gonna let you follow through on this, and then you have to deal with the taxpayers who are gonna get stuck footing the bill.
I mean, it sounds like, Rick, that is the stance Disney is taking, right? To say, look, it's fine, but you got to take on this debt. Until you do, we're going to just stay put.
Right. And the governor, the Republican governor, Ron DeSantis, he has said, don't worry, we're not going to leave Florida taxpayers stuck with the bill here. We're going to take care of this. We're going to rectify this. But he hasn't said how the government would do that. Basically, the Florida legislature would have to pass an additional law to straighten this out somehow. And even then, basically, it's as if Disney has a contract. And if they just say, no, Disney has to eat the debt somehow, then it seems that Disney could probably basically claim it's a breach of contract, and it could end up in the courts for a long time. I saw one person characterize the whole effort as the Lawyer Employment in Perpetuity Act. So what the Republicans seem to have done here is just create a legal thicket that's going to go on for some time.